Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this post-mortem of my Blitz game number 373. My opponent kicked off with d4 and I tried to play the Grunfeld again. Knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, and d5. Of course, bishop g7 and d6 is the King's Indian, another exciting way to play, but I've been trying to learn the Grunfeld, so d5. And my opponent goes for the main line here. Let's go ahead and put this on the opening book just to show you. C takes d5. Knight f3 is a way of avoiding the exchange, but the exchange is still the most popular way to play it. C takes d5. Take back. Another point about the Grunfeld, I should say, is that you have to play d5 right at this moment. If you wait with another move like developing the bishop, then White is going to play the move e4, and then d5 will be much more difficult, and that's you'll have transposed into a King's Indian. So that's why you play d5 right at this point. So c takes d5, knight takes d5, and then e4, kicking the knight. So this is the main line. White builds up a big center, and black gets this bishop on this dark square diagonal, which looks like it's momentarily blocked, but he has lots of ideas for undermining it. So that's what this opening comes down to, is a battle for this central formation here, a battle around the central formation, which gives it kind of a nice character, I think. So it's sort of an organizing principle for the opening. So my opponent plays bishop c4, which is one of the main lines, and in fact that's the way I like to play it. You get the bishop out ahead and then develop the knight to e2. And you can block the, if I try to pin the knight, you can block with f3. So c5 is the main move, just like I say, automatically going after that center. The other thing about the move c5 is that, well, right now if White were to take it, you could win it back with the move like queen a5. But even if you don't get the pawn back, if White takes this pawn, it leaves him with this really ruined pawn structure with an isolated pawn here and a pair of isolated pawns here. So Black is not at all afraid of just letting White take that pawn. Can treat it like a gambit and get good play for it. So you just throw that pawn up there without worrying about whether you can even recapture it or not. So knight e2 is the main idea after bishop to c4. Get the knight developed. Maybe it'll come out to f4 or g3 or support the pawns in the center here. And like I said, the bishop pin is met with the move f3. So my opponent played bishop b2 instead, trying to shore up the pawns from this direction. And now we're just out of the opening book. Looks like queen a5 is a good move here, pinning this pawn and increasing the pressure on the d pawn. I didn't think about that. I just castled, continued sort of normal developing moves. Knight e2 was played here, and knight c6. Adding more pressure to this pawn. My opponent castles here. And now I move my queen to c7. I want to bring a rook over to the d file, make it opposite the queen, get more pressure on the d pawn there. My opponent goes with d5. And apparently I can already just grab a pawn here. Because, yeah, there's a discovered attack on this bishop. This bishop is loose here. So I could have just played c takes d4 here. And if he takes back, then I can take on e5. Yeah, if I take on, I might have thought about this. If I take on d4, queen takes back and defends the bishop. But I can take on e5, and I'm hitting the bishop and snagging a pawn. So he can take and I grab the bishop, or he can just retreat the bishop and I move the knight somewhere. So interesting. He's already made a mistake here. I didn't spot the mistake, but I play rook d1, and this is definitely something I'm going to notice. There's a pin here which I created, and after he goes rook c1, then I can just take the pawn on e5. So I do grab the pawn eventually, and so I should just win the game from this point. I'm really up significantly, and he doesn't really have any compensation here. I've just accomplished everything I want to with the Grunfeld. I've undermined the center and won a pawn. So anyway, he retreats to bishop b3, getting the bishop out of the line of fire. I play b6. You know, the pawn is still pinned. I don't have to be in a hurry to move the knight away. He goes queen c2, and now I go just knight back to c6. It's interesting, the computer would continue with c4, a typical kind of maneuver. You often see this from computers. It's hard to spot sometimes, though. But just because your piece is under threat doesn't mean you can't threaten another piece. So c4, just leaving the knight where it is and attacking one of white's pieces. Good way to play. Knight to c6. I just retreated, and we get this exchange. And that's, I guess, why the way I played was not as good. Now I've got some weaknesses here that he can attack, but I'm still just a solid pawn up, and I've got good pieces. I haven't suffered any damage as a result of that. So anyway, black tries to get his pieces active with rook fd1, but he just goes in for a wholesale series of exchanges. I develop my bishop, get it on a good diagonal, and then he starts trading pieces off, which is just a mistake. Makes my job much easier. I'm not really interested in trading, but he keeps taking. And each trade benefits me, so it doesn't hurt if he wants to do these trades. So I trade everything down, and he goes into this endgame, which should just be losing. And right here, let's see, knight b4 is a good move. I wonder why knight b4 works. Oh, because of the pin. That's interesting. Knight b4 works because there's a pin on this pawn here. So if he takes my knight, I take his bishop. Cool. Knight to e5 is an idea. I need to clear this diagonal for the bishop and activate my knight. I chose the wrong move. I played knight to e7, and that's just a blunder, which I realized immediately after his next move. So my opponent spotted this one right away, bishop a3. And I'm giving a pawn back. Cancel that. This pawn is pinned. I can't move it, and I can't defend it. The knight's 3 hops away or 4 hops away from defending it, and the bishop is not really in a position to defend it either. So I'm just losing a pawn here. I go knight d5, which I guess is the best try. Counterattacking one of his pawns, but anyway, I gave him. He continues. He takes the pawn and attacks one of my pawns. So I've given him a good game here for no reason. I grabbed his pawn. Knight takes, bishop takes, and bishop takes. And in fact, we've gone to a position which is completely even. We have the bishop pair. The difference is that he's got this outside pass pawn. If all the pieces were removed, actually white would be winning. So I think in practical terms, the computer rates it as dead even, but in practical terms, white has the advantage at this point. He's got a clear plan of pushing this pawn and offering to trade more pieces and go into a winning endgame, whereas basically all I can do is play defensively and try not to... I can expand a little bit in the center, but basically white has all the winning chances here. So anyway, after clearly winning the whole game, I've managed to engineer this kind of position. My opponent continues with, and now it's my turn. I play bishop b4. I'm just going to try and slow down the advance of the a-pawn here, but he pushes on with a4. I go bishop to a5, getting in front of it. I should probably start bringing my king out. Yeah, that's sort of a wasted move. I'm preventing the pawn from going forward. I was worried about his move, bishop to b3, I guess, but he can't play that, or can he? Say if I go king f8, let's try this. Cancel that. King f8, and he plays here. Bishop to c6, he's going to advance, and then bishop to b5. I guess I just have to stop it on the light squares, let it go forward one more step. Okay, and at least I've brought my king one step closer. Anyway, I played bishop a5, tried to stop the pawn here. He goes bishop to e2. Then I start bringing my king in. Bishop to c5 check. Yeah, he starts harassing my king. But I think this helps a little bit. I'm getting my king closer to this pawn, which is a big threat. I'm now inside the square of the pawn, so that will help. Anyway, bishop to b5 check. Keep coming over. King to f1. He starts to bring his king into the game. King to c7. So the game goes into a kind of a complicated phase here. The engine still rates this as even, but there's a certain amount of maneuvering. He's going after my pawns. I'm going to push them forward. and try and get some activity, and also try and keep pressure on his pawn. With this move, I'm keeping his bishop tied down. So, and then, but notice he set up his bishops in a very clever way here. This bishop is covering all of these squares, and this bishop is covering all of these squares, which means my king has no way to get in. I guess there is a route. No, there's no route in. Even if I go over here, I'm still blocked. I can get to this square, but I still can't get in past the lines of the bishops. So the two bishops are doing a very effective job of screening my king out from contributing. So I just have to kind of wait and hope I don't lose. And the evaluation, yeah, is going up. It's now in favor of white. Either because of my imprecise moves or because the computer's looking further ahead now, it sees the advantage that white has in this position. But, well, I go for the counterattack. I need to try and develop some counter chances. And these pawns are all in dark squares, so I need to get my dark squared bishop active and try and go after him. He starts kicking my king around with his bishops. That made my job a little bit easier. Actually, if he had just kept my king in a box here, which he pretty much had it covered. What's the chess engine is recommending bishop to b6. Bringing the bishop out this way. I could still come forward with my king. Yeah, a little bit hard to say. But he played the check, and I come forward on the dark squares. I'm still trying to get to this pawn and put more pressure on it. Bishop to c7, however, cuts me off. Is that true? I could still go to this square. The engine is recommending bishop c4 check, king e3, and bishop c3. Let's take a look at this. Bishop c4 check. King goes to e3. And then king to d5. What is wrong with this move? Something like this. Trying to go after the pawn. Yeah, these positions are really hard to understand. Bishop to b4. Maybe just because it thinks that I can hold the pawn here indefinitely and just shuffle my king between these squares, not try to prove anything. I was trying to play a little more actively and go after that pawn. How about the immediate king to b4 there, hitting the pawn? Bishop to d6 check. King to a5. I'm in front of the pawn. I'm putting pressure on it, but bishop to d7. Then he can start going after my pawns. That's interesting. So if I take his pawn, he'll take my pawn, and he might be able to. The bishop from here might be able to go after my light squared pawns. Okay, tricky position. So still with an edge to white. I played bishop f2 with the idea of going after these dark squared pawns, like I mentioned. He played a5, and I didn't recognize the threat here. When I moved my king here and my bishop here, I thought, well, my king is covering these squares, so he can't skewer my king, right? But he played a5, and I ignored the threat. I played bishop to g1, going after the pawn as I intended. And right here, he can just win the game with this move, bishop to bishop to b6 check. So he didn't spot that. He played king e2 instead, going the wrong way with the king. The other way of winning this is king to c3. Of course, this is going to be followed up with bishop b6 check anyway, so that's the key idea, is bishop b6. Anyway, he went king e2, and now I can gobble some pawns and get some counterplay. He goes after my bishop. Well, he had an idea here, so now this is a bit dangerous. My bishop is trapped back here. So let's see, what should I have played here? I should have played bishop c4 check, driving his king away. Interesting. So I grabbed the pawn. He goes after my bishop, and once again, white is winning. But I use my bishop to screen his king out. Once again, you see the power of the bishops and controlling where your opponent's king can go. And he checks me. I go to d6, and he starts pushing his pawn forward. But I do have this square covered. What he needs to do is maneuver this bishop around to this square. If he can get his bishop to the b7 square, then he can push that through. But right now my king is covering those squares. He takes the bishop out to b5. And now I bring in the h-pawn because I want to rescue this bishop here. He goes a7. Once again, there's a winning plan here with bishop c5 check. Okay, let's take a look at this. Bishop c5 check. Yeah, I'm going to bring the king this way. Bishop to d6. He's going to keep my king kind of shut out. Say I try to go this way. Bishop to e5. Just sitting here on this position. King to d8. That's kind of mysterious. Yeah, well, I guess these squares are controlled, so I can't go anywhere with my king. Maybe my pieces are all in their optimum position. And if I try this move, g takes h4. Oh, that's what he's done. He's protected this bishop, so my bishop is still trapped, and effectively I'm a piece down. So that's how white can still maintain his advantage and probably win the game. Instead he played a7. I push on with h4. And he played g4, and now this is winning for black. I can take the pawn, and after a few more moves, yeah, he resigns at this point. So my pawns crash through on the king side. So interesting back and forth endgame. A lot of mistakes there. It goes to show, maybe we're running low on time at the end, but it goes to show that endgames can be quite tricky and tactical, and it's really those skewers you have to watch out for, as well as those ways to advance your pawns. And the use of the bishops to control where the king can go and keep him screened out of certain areas is very important, especially when you have the bishop pair. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.